Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, Tottenham, they were good, but Mauricio Pochettino claims they'll get even better after their stunning 3-1 victory over Chelsea at Wembley Stadium. No heart, no desire, the special one. He threatens big changes after a desperate 0-0 draw at home to Crystal Palace. And Mark Hughes, he's clinging on at Southampton. Their fans were singing, "You're getting sacked" in the morning during their 3-2 defeat at Fulham yesterday. Getting the job done this morning, Oliver Holt, he's the chief sports writer at the Mail on Sunday. Jeremy Cross is the chief sports writer at the Daily Star. Matt Law is the football news correspondent at the Daily Telegraph. Morning, guys. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Don't forget, you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a look at some of the papers then. The back of the Mail on Sunday, big story this, particularly after events at Old Trafford yesterday. David De Gea on his way out of Manchester United. He's joining Paris Saint-Germain, according to Joe Bernstein this morning. We're getting on to Manchester United, all things Mourinho and United in part 2 of today's programme, because they've got no heart and no desire. Mourinho's criticism of his players after that draw with Palace yesterday at Old Trafford. He is spitting mad with that performance on the back of the Sunday People this morning. And another transfer story, rats, all of them deserting the sinking ship, according to the Star. It's Paul Pogba on his way out to Inter Milan, according to them this morning. We're getting on to this, though, in part 1 of today's programme. They deserve to be in part 1 as well. Tottenham, a bracing performance yesterday against Chelsea. They won 3-1. It's a nice one, my son. He deserved to score his goal. He did score for Tottenham yesterday at Wembley. Pochettino, though, he says Tottenham can get even better. It's time to deliver, though. That's the back of the Sunday Express this morning. It was a very impressive performance. Ollie, Matt was there, I was there, you were there yesterday. We all wrote about it this morning. A whippersnapper in the Sun says in years to come, this will be remembered as the complete Premier League performance. Granddads will sit their grandchildren on their knees to tell them with all misty-eyed about the manner of this performance and how compelling it was. Was it the complete Premier League performance?
It was an absolutely terrific performance, I thought, yeah. I mean, there was an awful lot to admire. Son was absolutely fantastic. His pace destroyed Chelsea. I thought Eriksen showed yet again how important he is to Tottenham. He's just he's a rare calibre of player, Eriksen, and it surprises me actually that he's not already being tied down to a longer-term contract and a more lucrative contract, because I think he's the brains of that team, and he was fantastic. He had a hand in 2 of the goals, could have, set up others as well. Kane showed the level of his ambition, and this is a Tottenham side that wasn't at full strength. Most of the first choice defence arguably was out, and they were just superb. They're on a different level to Chelsea yesterday, and this is a team that was, came into this game unbeaten. I know they'd been creaking a little bit, Chelsea, but still, for Spurs to play the way they have, and I think, those of us who were there, we looked around the stadium beforehand. I'm not going to say it's half empty. It wasn't half empty, but it's a big stadium. The upper tier was largely empty. I think that would be fair to say. There's a degree of disillusion going on, understandably, amongst the Tottenham fan base about the delays to the move. We've seen a lot of times in the past with other teams, it's very, very easy for that kind of dissatisfaction, disillusionment to bleed into team performances. And I think it is hugely to the credit of Pochettino and the players that hasn't happened. And in fact, they seem to be going from strength to strength. It was probably the best Premier League performance I've seen this season.
Yeah, very, very impressive. What impressed you about that Spurs display, Matt?
I was very impressed with the way Pochettino set up. I think he beat Sarri up on the day, to be honest with you, with his tactics. I mean, Son was an interesting selection. They had got an agreement with South Korea that he wouldn't go on international duty in the last break, so he was one of the few of their top players not to have been away. So he played him, and you could tell the energy he had, that he had been around. I think a lot of people thought Lamela might start a game like that. That paid off. Winks on the bench, Foyth instead of Vertonghen, could have brought Vertonghen straight back. But he put Dele Alli onto Jorginho, almost man-marked him at times, and that just worked amazingly. They let the ball go out to Kante a lot when Chelsea were attacking, and it just kept breaking down because his distribution is probably his weak point, and they'd pinpointed that. And I just thought Pochettino got everything right, and Sarri got everything wrong.
People will talk inevitably about the next step, and Pochettino said last night that this wasn't Tottenham's best performance of the season. Perhaps if we looked at the 3-0 victory at Old Trafford right at the start of the season, he might have been referring to that, Jeremy. But the obvious next question for this team is, OK, you play great football, we're all impressed with it, but when are you going to start delivering the silverware that Tottenham supporters crave?
Well, the guys are very enthused about Tottenham, and I totally get why. Pochettino's doing a remarkable job there, but I always get the feeling that there's a backstory to this, and it is when will they win something? How long do you go saying they're a great team and with a great manager, but they've actually got nothing to show for it so far? Now, that could change this season. They could win a trophy this season. I don't think they'll win the Premier League this season. I mean, they are a very good side and they're great to watch. They play some great football, but they're still light years behind City, I think, in terms of the title race, along with everyone else.
Yeah.
So they're probably not going to win the title. They're probably not going to get out of the Champions League group. They need a lot of things to go in their favour for that to happen. So you're looking at a domestic trophy, and that would be a major breakthrough for Pochettino. If I was a Tottenham fan, I would be worried that the better they get, the more chance there is of Pochettino leaving.
The only thing I'd say on that is that the last time they won a trophy was with Wanda Ramos, and they won the League Cup. Now, they won a League Cup, which the fans, a great day out, they really enjoyed it. But what did that actually give the club in terms of long term? It gave them nothing. I mean, within a year, they were fighting relegation, had to bring Harry Redknapp in. Mauricio Pochettino winning a League Cup or FA Cup, nice day out. But he's giving them much more than that at the moment. He's completely changed the whole club. It's worth far more than one of those trophies, what he's done at the moment.
But what's the ultimate? What's the end game?
Well,
for
their problem is that they're now operating in an era where, as you say, Man City are almost becoming untouchable, and that is a very difficult situation. But I don't think that the League Cup or the FA Cup they should particularly prioritise, because...
Although I think I kind of agree with you, but I think that sometimes those trophies act as catalysts for other things, don't they? I mean, clearly they didn't in the case that you're mentioning with Wanda Ramos, but Mourinho, for instance, won the League Cup with Chelsea, and it seemed to act as a springboard. And I think sometimes winning the League Cup or the FA Cup can do that, even though in it of itself it's not. Yeah. They're no longer, sadly, important trophies. They can sometimes act as a springboard. So, I mean, I do think it would be a step forward a huge step forward for them if they won something this year. But I also agree with Matt that, they are achieving a lot with the strength of their performances and their league position, and it is hard in an era where City appear to be so dominant.
Why do you feel that they need to get across the line and win a trophy though? Because isn't it enough to be almost guaranteed 9 times out of 10 you can rock up to watch Tottenham play and you'll be impressed and you'll enjoy it? Isn't that enough?
Well, it depends what your view is. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I would like to see my team win something from time to time. I don't say I want to see them win a trophy every season, but I just think it's great that you have some reward for the progress you make.
It's not enough just to play nice football. It's a lot, but it's not enough. Jeremy's right. Football's about winning trophies, isn't it? It's about medals. It's about players winning medals. So
if we applied Mourinho's rules to Tottenham, Pochettino wouldn't even be in the job anymore, would he? If we applied his principles of trophy hunting, trophy-winning managers, being ruthless, getting across the line, it doesn't matter how you play, what tactics or what methods you use, you have to win trophies. Pochettino wouldn't even be at Tottenham.
I mean, according to Mourinho, Pochettino would be a specialist in failure. Absolutely. But that's, I think some of Mourinho's philosophy has been exposed for what it is, for the emptiness that it is recently, and I think people are appreciate. Can you imagine? You watched that performance yesterday. What Manchester United fans at the moment would give for a performance like that from their team?
Pretty much anything.
Yeah, and so winning trophies is important, but it isn't everything.
Where the Chelsea, when you look at that performance yesterday, 3-0 down, Giroud comes off the substitutes bench, scores, still no hope of them getting back into that game. Why did they perform like that in a big London derby, big rivals at Wembley Stadium.
Well, they could have lost, they could have lost 5 or 6 as well. I mean,
that could have been the half-time score.
Yeah, they were actually fortunate to lose 3-1. That's been coming. I mean, they've got away with it a little bit this season. Against West Ham, they got away with it. Against Palace, to a certain extent, they got away with it. Against Everton, they got away with it a little bit. The defence hasn't looked right. They've got away with mistakes in defence. David Luiz in that back four will always let you down, pretty much. There'll always be a mistake in him, and a big mistake. And the big problem they've got, though, now going forward is the Jorginho thing, is people have worked out Sarri's secret on that. Silva put Richarlison onto him in the Everton game and just got him out of the game. He nearly got sent off in that game, he should have done. Tottenham do the same thing with him with Dele Alli. Could have been sent off yesterday. And it's just, everyone's will have now cottoned onto it. Everyone's going to now do the same thing. And everyone's also cottoned onto the fact that Kante just doesn't offer them what he would do in his rightful position of a defensive midfielder, stuck out on the right of a three-man midfield. And I actually think they could have real problems if Sarri won't change now. If he's just going to stick to this one way, it's there for everyone to see. It's quite an easy tactic to just try and nullify them. And it also stops the ball getting to Hazard. He got really frustrated yesterday. I mean, he got booked for piling into the back of Ben Davis. So I think there's a lot of work to do at Chelsea. I think it's actually going to be quite tough for them from now on.
They've got issues up front as well, haven't they? I mean, if Hazard's not scoring goals, they don't have an abundance of players to bail him out. So, I mean, they, ironically, would look a great side if they had somebody like a good old-fashioned centre-forward playing from like Diego Costa maybe, but he's gone. So, and they are very reliant on Hazard. So, and he has obviously scored a lot of goals this season so far, but that is Hazard a player who is going to consistently get you 25 goals a season? I doubt that.
I think Morata's is a really good player, really talented player, but he was desperately poor yesterday. And I've seen him before this season when he might as well not have been on the pitch. I mean, I think his confidence looks as if it's on the floor.
Yeah.
And he's a passenger at the moment. And Matt made a lot of good points about the issues that Chelsea are facing, but they do look short. They look massively short.
What was going on at the back yesterday, Ollie? Matt just mentioned David Luiz, but that performance from an elite level athlete, professional footballer, was extraordinary.
Yeah, it was. And you look at instances like when Son scored the third goal, which was a terrific goal and a great run. But I mean, their defending was shocking there, and particularly I think, the way he went past Jorginho as if he was running in treacle for a start, which, again, that's not Jorginho's job to be out there, but and then David Luiz's challenge, you couldn't even call it a challenge. I mean, it was nothing. I mean, Son went past him as if he wasn't there, and that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. But that was, the way that he turned his back on Harry Kane's shot. I mean, that was just an odd goal. Full stop. I don't know what the keeper was doing there either.
He actually looked. He body swerved to avoid the ball.
He actively avoided it. Yes,
Which is the exact opposite of what you want a defender to do.
Yeah.
Remember imagine something like John Terry ever doing something like that.
I mean, I think part of the issue there is that they desperately need really strong protection in front of that back four to camouflage those problems. And when that protection starts to break down, which it did yesterday, then the vulnerabilities in that defence are exposed.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Kante thing, I think, is a huge issue, because he is possibly the world's best at what he does as a holding midfielder, but he's not the world's best as a right-sided midfielder. He's nowhere near. And I think sooner or later, and probably it happened yesterday, people, as Matt was saying, are going to realise that, and they are realising the fact that Jorginho, he's a terrific player, but he has shortcomings. And I think yesterday marked the end of the honeymoon, very definitely for Sarri.
Chelsea have had some magnificent screening players in front of their back four in the past. So I think back to Deschamps, Claude Makelele particularly. Yeah. Is Kante better?
I'm not sure if he's better, but I mean, I think Makelele was always held up as the standard. And I think that Kante is on that level as a holding midfield player. And you listen to some of his contemporaries talk about him and what he brings and his reading of the game, his the way he can sense trouble three or four passes ahead of time. I mean, people talk about his contemporaries, his fellow players, talk about him in the highest possible terms, and I think he's an unbelievably good player. And I find it, obviously Sarri is an incredibly intelligent coach, but I find it is the one thing that I find odd that Kante is being played out of position when he's the best in the world at his position. The
other issue is Hazard's obviously they're trying to desperately to get him to sign a new deal, but when he experiences days like yesterday, he'll probably think, maybe I'm best going somewhere else.
Yeah, but he can blame himself for that. He's got to take responsibility for his own performance yesterday.
He can't play the worldie every week, though, can he?
That's the level he's at, isn't it? That's we talk about Hazard in those terms, though, don't we?
He was still the best player in that Chelsea team, I think, yesterday. And there were a couple of times when he almost made something from nothing. But and I think he should have won a penalty. He should have had a penalty in the first half, which I don't think would have changed the outcome of the game, but would have changed the dynamic of it a bit. Foyt was lucky to get away with that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he can't win the game by himself, but I thought he still played well yesterday.
He's made it clear that he wants to play in one of the best sides in the world. I mean, he wants to play for Real Madrid, but he wants to be part of one of the world's best teams, and he's not even in the best team in London at the moment. I mean, Tottenham are the best team in London at the moment. So unless an offer's not going to come for him, then I think he will look to leave.
Yeah. Well, is it a summer move we're looking at? Because he talked.
Oh yeah, no chance. Absolutely no chance. January, no chance.
Because he talked at the World Cup.
Yeah.
We know where.
I mean, the only problem he's got is that no one's quite sure what Real Madrid want to do. I mean, that club's in complete chaos. They lost 3-0 at the weekend, and it seems to be a one-club market for him. So if Real Madrid don't come or can't come, then he'll have to stay at Chelsea.
But how desperate are Chelsea to keep him, Matt?
Oh, they'll give him. They'd pay him. They'd make him the best player in the Premier League to keep him. They'd do anything to keep him. He can become captain if he wants to be. He can earn probably 500 grand a week if he wants to. If he were to turn around and say they'd give him anything.
And so they should, I think. I mean, in terms of the talent in our league, I mean, we talk about Kante, and I think you could make an argument for him being one of the most talented players in our league, but you could certainly make that argument for Hazard.
Yeah, sure. OK, tough times for Chelsea after that defeat yesterday and the manner of it against Tottenham. Tough times up at Old Trafford as well for Jose Mourinho and Manchester United. We'll talk more about their 0-0 draw with Crystal Palace. That's coming next. Welcome back. A brutal analysis from Jose Mourinho yesterday at Old Trafford after Manchester United's 0-0 draw with Crystal Palace. He said that his players have got no heart and no desire in that performance, Jeremy. It was a poor performance, even judging by their own recent standards at Old Trafford. But more criticism of his Manchester United players. Can he ever get to a point where this dressing room is fully supportive of what he's trying to do?
No, I think those days are gone.
Has he got any friends in there?
Matic and Fellaini, I think, and that's about as far as it goes. That dressing room is in a bit of a state from what speaking to people at the club and players, people and things like that, and it sounds very sort of torn. And the one person to blame for that is the manager, because he creates this atmosphere that's reflective of how he behaves. So we were talking off air earlier about the interview he gave in midweek, where he was basically trying to make a wider point about how younger players are basically mollycoddled and they're not allowed to think for themselves, they're too soft, which is a fair point, he's probably right, but he also named 4 of his own players, which to me just seems a really, really bizarre and dangerous thing to do for a manager. And one of the players he mentioned was Anthony Martial, who's basically helped keep him in a job these last 4 or 5 weeks with his performances and goals. And United are trying to persuade Marshall to sign a new contract, and then you've got Marshall umming and ahhing about what to do and what his options may be in the summer. And he's probably wanting to know what's going to go on with Mourinho. And then you've got the manager naming him basically to the world, saying he's an example of a player who is too soft.
Do you think when that interview filtered back into this country, of course it did, because they always do, do you think that affects the mentality of the footballers before they walk out onto the pitch? You do?
I mean, when you look at United, I see quite a lot of their games, and that no heart and no desire, he's right. They're not showing any heart or desire, but they are playing like a group of players who want him to get sacked. They have his destiny, really, in their hands, and a lot of their performances just look like players who really don't care about Mourinho.
Also, if they're... OK, so if... which I don't necessarily think they are, but if they're cosseted, overprotected, oversensitive players, him saying they've got no heart and no desire, what's that going to do to them? It's not going to help them, is it? If they're not robust individuals, which he's saying they're not, these players that he's talking about, he's saying they've got no cojones or whatever, then he's just making the situation worse. And I found that outburst in that interview, or that, to be fair to him, I suppose it was not an outburst, it was an analysis, but it was quite a damning analysis of the modern player and of 4 players within his own squad. As Jeremy said, one of whom has pretty much kept him in a job.
Well, Luke Shaw was another player.
Luke Shaw was another.
There's a guy who nearly lost... Well, he revealed to us a few weeks ago, didn't he? His leg break was so bad, he nearly lost his leg. He's done really well to get back, not only get back to full fitness, but get back in the team. He got his place back in the England squad. And so you can't accuse someone of Luke Shaw's standing as having no heart, desire or character.
Also, I'm not... so I don't want to claim this for myself, actually, but I was talking to Rob Draper, my colleague at the Mail on Sunday, yesterday before the game at Wembley, and we were talking about these comments from Mourinho, and he said he comes across Mourinho as somebody who doesn't like young players. He distrusts young players, and I thought it was a really good point, because one of the things about Ferguson, one of the many great things about Ferguson, was his ability to change and to adapt and to keep moving on from generation to generation, being able to get the best out of younger generation. He loved bringing younger players through. He loved youth. Mourinho's talking like somebody who distrusts these players, and that, this is a club which is quite rightly proud of its reputation as a club that brings through young players, has a magnificent record in bringing through young players, still does, and yet he's talking about those players in these terms, which implies a bit of disdain, really. And I just thought it was a really interesting window on the problems that there are at United.
When he first came to Chelsea, I would argue that Mourinho was a very measured character, Matt. Certainly first time around. Now it feels like he's erratic. What has changed? What do you see? What are the changes? What changes do you see in him?
I think the football world has changed a lot around him. I think Mourinho manages by fear, and I think that used to work. And I also think that's why he has these 3-year cycles, because for 2 years he manages with this fear, and usually around the 3rd year the players will start to kind of rise against him because they get sick of being managed by fear. I think that when he was at his most successful, he's generally managed in divisions where there's only really been 1 or 2 clubs who can win the league. He's always been at one of the clubs who can spend the most, and is already one of the best clubs in the league. Now, he's still at a club that can spend the most, but the problem is he's got 4 or 5 of the clubs who can spend a lot of money. You've got 4 or 5 of the clubs with really good coaches. And I think now his whole philosophy that was so successful has just been overtaken. And I think he's struggling to cope with that, and he's struggling to renew himself with that. On the young players, I've actually heard him say a very similar thing when he was at Chelsea the second time. I remember we were talking to him about Loftus-Cheek, and he talked about entourages around players and parents around players and how they can be too weak and how this can damage them. But that was in the second season of his comeback, when he was going to win the league. So he was saying it from a position of strength. So it didn't have any sort of impact like it had now, and the players just had to accept it at the time. The timing of this, I think, I don't think what he said is necessarily a problem, because I actually think, as you said, he's got a good point. and a lot of what he's talking about is probably true. It's kind of stuff we moaned about with Arsenal and Wenger for ages, that, you know, they were too cosseted and all this.
Part of the thing with that, Matt, is we probably think that too, and some of us more than others are middle-aged men like Mourinho. That's just the way the players are. We can't change that. We may wish that it was different. The way they act, their habits may be sort of foreign to us, and we may not approve of them. But that's the way they are. That's the way it is now. Yeah. You know, young players spend a lot of time on social media. They all have a social media presence. We may think that's not great if they're not winning trophies or whatever. But that's just the way it is. And you have to, I think, as a manager, you have to adapt to that, and you have to accept that, and you have to try and work. You have to work as a manager. You have to work with what you've got. There's no point railing against the way modern life is. It's the way it is. Make the best of it. And as you say, Pochettino, Klopp, Guardiola don't do that. You know, they are, all of them, getting the best out of their players. They're not complaining about the youth of today. They're getting the best out of the youth of today.
I mean, look how he treats his players. Like, if you look yesterday at Klopp, his arm round Salah, for example. OK, I know he's a bit more experienced and he's an older player, but he's straight onto the pitch, arm round him. The way that he talks about Sadio Mane, you can make the argument, a whole raft of players at Tottenham, that Pochettino's got that same...
Well, look at, I mean, Dele Alli's had a tough week with being filmed on social media and various accusations being thrown at him, and he wasn't playing great, and Pochettino trusts him and puts him and is repaid for that.
I think in style and in attitude, in style on the pitch and in attitude off the pitch, Mourinho looks more and more like yesterday's man.
Looks like a tired old guy now.
Is Manchester United's biggest problem Jose Mourinho?
Yeah. I mean, if you break down that squad of players, they've got some fantastic players. I mean, Alexis Sánchez, what a player he used to be at Arsenal in his pomp. He was one of the best players in the world. He's joined United on a ridiculously large salary, and United have pushed the boat out to get him. Because City wanted him. I know City pulled out in the end, but I think United promised him the earth. They told him what he wanted to hear. He can't start a game. He was on the bench again yesterday. He was fuming the other week, and he started on the bench against City. I mean, what? If you were Ed Woodward, you'd be looking at this thinking, what is going on here? How have we got such a good player? He cannot get into that team.
But Ed Woodward appointed him, and Ed Woodward made appointments
before
that didn't work. I mean, United's problems haven't started with Mourinho.
No, I'm not a massive fan of Ed Woodward, but I mean, he has given him plenty of resource, to be fair. And people say, oh yeah, but he hasn't got the defence that he wants. Well, United have got the biggest wage bill in the league. I mean, he has backed him.
I totally agree with that, but the problems haven't started with Mourinho.
No.
The problems have started with the appointments since Ferguson.
That's true.
So the problems must go further than Mourinho. It can't just be Mourinho.
You know what, Neil? I was thinking last night, in a fantasy world, I would love to see Guardiola manage United for 3 months. So, right, you take charge of that group of players for 3 months, become United manager, and just see in 3 months' time how much better they are compared to what they're at now. I'd love to see that.
With the current...
Pochettino.
No, well, Pochettino or Klopp.
Yeah. What's the solution? What will United do? Stick or twist?
I think the board are basically in a state of flux where they can't work out if the team's bad enough to justify sacking Mourinho. And then they have the other issue of what if they do sack him, they create the problem of who do they bring in, because obviously United, when they're choosing a new manager, they pick from a very small pool. I mean, the obvious choice would be Pochettino. But would United be able to leverage Pochettino out of Tottenham? I mean, I know we talked about this earlier, didn't we? They're moving to a new stadium. It's a big, exciting time for Tottenham. I mean, the mistake United made was...
Even you might get caught up in the Poch love at some point.
When they appointed Mourinho, in hindsight, they're probably thinking now we should have gone for Pochettino.
It's interesting, though, isn't it, when Jeremy's saying... I mean, how bad does it have to get for United? I mean, I think it's a level of their kind of reduced expectations that they've been sort of battered down a bit in the struggles after the Ferguson era. They're 7th in the league.
14 points off the top.
You know, and I think as long as they're in the Champions League, I suppose, then they're not going to I don't think they'll sack Mourinho, but I think once and if they go out of the Champions League, then I think there are going to be a lot of hard decisions.
I think they'll see it through to the summer now.
But Mourinho just comes across as being someone who is trying to engineer the sack. I know that sounds a crazy thing to say, but just when you look at the whole spectrum of his behaviour, it's so random and controversial and confrontational. You just think, this guy is giving this club loads of excuses to sack him.
Would you sack him?
Now? I wouldn't sack him now. I would basically get to the end of the season, see where you're at, and if there is no sign of any improvement, you would speak to the players, obviously, if you were on the board, and say, look, what's going on here?
If they don't finish in the top 4, I don't see how you can't sack him.
If they're not playing Champions League, they might win the Champions League, Matt,
They might win the Champions League.
They might not make
Strange
it out of the
things
group.
have happened.
A couple of transfer stories here. De Gea on his way to Paris Saint-Germain. Joe Bernstein. This is the problem you've got when the team isn't performing well, is that all of a sudden the jungle drums start beating, and you've got one of your best players, David De Gea, Player of the Year.
Their best player.
4 of the last 5 years, is it? Yeah, their best player. On his way to Paris Saint-Germain.
Every week it's, Pogba, Sanchez, now De Gea. All their best players seemingly want to leave.
Oh.
De Gea, I think, would be the biggest... If United's board, you'll know this more than me, if United's board think that De Gea wants to leave Manchester United because of Jose, basically, and they're left with a choice between De Gea and Jose, there's only one choice to make, isn't it? You back De Gea.
That would be the
a bit like
point.
Chelsea in the summer backed Hazard over Conte because they were worried about losing him. That could be the tipping point. If they think they'd lose De Gea but could keep him by getting rid of Jose, that could be the tipping point.
That's the problem already for them. Pogba, I know that Pogba has not played to the potential that we see, or to the standard, say, that he played with France in the World Cup. But Pogba, I still believe Pogba is one of the world's best players, potentially. But Mourinho isn't getting the best out of him. And so we come back to this thing. We're told that the board very much want Martial to stay as well. Mourinho clearly doesn't particularly like
to leave.
Martial.
Yeah.
So the board have got this big issue where if Mourinho stays, then there are going to be a lot of their best players who want to go. If Mourinho goes, maybe they'll be able to keep some of these players and start realising the potential, because there's a reason why they've got the highest wage bill in the country. It's because they've got an awful lot of very talented players. It's just that the manager isn't getting the best out of them.
If De Gea goes, there's not one United supporter who could begrudge him right. They would just have to say, thanks, David. You've been a great servant to this club. You've been our best player for the last 3 or 4 seasons. But you have to accept that De Gea will think, I'm too good for this team. He's playing behind a poor defence week in, week out.
Yeah, we're getting fed up with this one.
And he wants to be winning Champions League trophies, he wants to be winning titles, and he's not going to win those at United.
Because his status in the game means that
he's
probably
too good for that team.
Yeah. I'd like to mention Palace as well, because there was another team playing at Old Trafford yesterday. They did draw 0-0. It's a result Palace needed because their home record has been so poor this season. But that should give them a bit of belief, Matt.
Yeah, it should do. There's been a few little kind of green shoots. They played quite well against Tottenham, didn't they? And were unlucky to lose. They actually did OK at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea as well. I think there's enough there. They had chances to win that game. Yes, Townsend towards the end. If they can just start putting a few away, and the biggest problem, obviously, is it always just seems like it's kind of Zaha or nothing in terms of scoring. In January, if they can just try and find someone who might even just score them 7 or 8 goals other than Zaha, they'll be absolutely fine. But there's been encouragement the last few weeks, I think, for Palace.
Yeah, certainly has. OK, that's Roy Hodgson, former England manager, getting a 0-0 draw up at Old Trafford yesterday. Next up, we're going to talk about the current England manager, Gareth Southgate. He's taking England to the Nations League finals next summer. More on him next. Welcome back. With us this morning, Oliver Holt, Jeremy Cross and Matt Law. Let's just remind you what's in the papers this morning, back of the Sunday Express. Bit of Poch love, but he says it's time to deliver. Tottenham can get even better. Good performance, a very good performance against Chelsea yesterday, 3-1 at Wembley. Nice one. My son scoring yesterday the 3rd goal for Tottenham in that 3-1 victory over Chelsea. Mourinho's not happy. We're going to get on to, this is the back page of the Sunday Mirror, shall I say, no heart and no desire after that 0-0 draw with Crystal Palace at Old Trafford. Some transfer stories. David De Gea on his way out of Old Trafford, according to Joe Bernstein this morning. £60 million. He's going to Paris Saint-Germain next summer. We've just talked about Mourinho and all things Manchester United. Let's talk all things England now, because they've qualified for the Nations League finals in Portugal. They'll be based in Porto next summer. Matt, how impressed were you? How impressed have you been with England's performances and the attitude of the players, the desire since the World Cup? Because it's something that Gareth Southgate touched on after the victory, after the dramatic nature of the victory against Croatia, and it's something that clearly has impressed him, that his players are still with him and they're still the demands, and he still wants to win.
It's been really impressive. I mean, since the World Cup, we've had two of the best performances I can remember watching England in about 10 years, and that was the Spain and Croatia games. I think that they were superb performances. What's actually impressed me most is Southgate after the World Cup, because we had a relatively successful World Cup, could have just left everything the same. I thought, this is doing well for me. I don't want to rock the boat. I'm not going to take any risks. He's actually changed a lot. He's changed the formation. The squad's looking a lot different. You know, you've got Chilwell coming in. I know Gomez would have gone to the World Cup, but you've got Gomez coming in, you've got Barkley, you've got Sancho around. People like Maguire and Trippier, who were the heroes of the World Cup for us, all of a sudden their places are in doubt. That could have gone really wrong for Southgate. I mean, that's quite a gamble from that World Cup to do that. And I'm just really impressed. He doesn't have a fear of failure. He sticks to what he wants to do. And I just think he's doing a brilliant, brilliant job. And the next challenge for England heading into the Nations League now is going to be to play with expectation, because we haven't played with expectation for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years or so. And now we will. We will go into that Nations League, like it or not, as favourites with the other countries that are there. And that's going to be a new challenge for them. But it's so encouraging at the moment.
Yeah, it's encouraging the way that the demand to beat Croatia, that even when they fell behind, that they were determined to see the job through and get it done. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, I mean, in years gone by, that game...
Just reminded me of sort of Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson.
Yeah.
That they could be losing the game, but they would throw everything at it. That the manager would gamble with the changes, and Southgate did just that. He made some very, very early changes. He was swift, he was decisive. He made the changes to affect the game.
Yeah, I mean, like I was just going to say, in years gone by, that game would have ended in defeat, you know. But the squad is now so young. It's almost like these guys under Southgate's watch have no fear. They just keep plugging away. They're not afraid to try things. They're very brave for their age, courageous, and they have this inner belief that their system will work and it will pay dividend. And that Croatia comeback was a perfect example. I mean, Matt's hit the nail on the head there. When we got to the semi-final of the World Cup, that was as good as it's been for generations. And it would have been easy for Southgate to just say, right, I've got a good side here, let's stick with this. But actually, that Croatia game, there were only 5 players, I think, started that game who started the World Cup semi-final against Croatia in Moscow. So, like Matt said, it's like a conveyor belt. He's trying to bring through all this young talent. And for years, we had this thing with he's too young to play for England. But Southgate's just demolished that sort of attitude. And he doesn't care how old a player is. All he cares about is how good he is. And I think the future's looking really bright.
Yeah, I think he's... I think one of the other things, on a slightly wider point that he's done, Southgate, and I guess we talked about this a lot during the World Cup, but he does seem to remove the fear from playing for England as well. And I think that was a courageous thing that he did. He sort of made a lot of steps to get rid of that fear that a lot of former players have talked about. And I think you can see that now in the performances of the players. I think the fear has gone. England is something to be enjoyed again. Everybody's on side with it. The public are on side with it. The public are bought into it. The media, we've all bought into it. Results are there. You know, suddenly it's a virtuous circle rather than a climate of fear.
There's a massive opportunity there. I mean, the under-21s, I think, have gone 22 games or so unbeaten. They head into the under-21 championships with a real chance of winning that. And, you know, it sounds ridiculous, and I'm sure I'll get battered on Twitter for this, but it's not inconceivable that the under-21s win their tournament We could win Euro 2020. I think, were we to go all the way, there's only one round of games where we'd have to play away from Wembley necessarily. It's basically a home tournament. And then you're into 2022. I mean, we do have an opportunity.
We conquer the world here, man.
We could conquer the world.
Women's World Cup next summer.
Yeah, exactly. But there's an amazingly good, for all we moan about English players not getting a chance in the Premier League, there's a great pool of talent for him to pick from at the moment. And because he knows that whole under-21 setup, it all seems very well connected these days within the FA. I do genuinely think there's a great opportunity there to have a fantastic, fantastic few years.
Because England are in the finals of the Nations League, has it worked?
I think, look, yeah, I know we laugh about that, but it got derided, didn't it, that competition when it was announced, and we all sort of struggled to get our heads around it, how it would work, the format. But I've quite enjoyed it, actually, irrespective of England doing well. The groups were small, so, like, for instance, last week, England could have got relegated, they could have stayed second, they could have got through, which they did. So it sort of adds that new dimension to it where everything could happen in one game, which you don't often get at international level. And, yeah, it's been good, I've enjoyed it.
I think it's... I hate to be misery about it. I think it's a bit of a con. I mean, I
don't use to be curmudgeonly.
I just...
You sound like Mourinho.
Yeah, I know, that's true. That's true. I think that it's been a successful con because everybody's bought into it. Players have bought, we're all up for it, partly because England have done well in it, but they're still, it's how much does it mean if we win the Nations League? I don't know. How much does it mean? Whoever wins it, how much does that mean? Does it? What level is that at? Is it like it's a tournament of friendlies, or is it below the Euros? Is it below the World Cup? I mean, I think it is, but
surely it's got to be better than a load of meaningless
it's better.
friendlies.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But it's still. It's sort of what they've managed to do, and I say I applaud them for it because the result is that we have been to games that have been competitive games, but what they've done is they've turned them into competitive friendlies, basically.
I think it's great for international football because it does make it more exciting, but I think it's terrible for club football. I do understand why Pochettino and Klopp are really concerned about the demands on the players, because all of a sudden players can't get rested at all. You can only make 3 substitutions because it's tournament, so you can't rotate the players within a game. The demands on the players are actually becoming stupid.
So next June, people like Harry Kane and Raheem Sterling and all the rest, they could be playing in a Champions League final on the Saturday, and on the Wednesday they're playing in a semi-final of the Nations League.
Potentially play 3 games in a week.
Yeah, and this is June, which is on the back of a World Cup
and
where...
It's
too much.
It's a different point, but it's a good point, and it's supposed to be a down year. It's supposed to be a summer where they can refresh a little bit, and that changes things.
It's a down year for Martin O'Neill as well, Ollie. It certainly is now. He's lost his job as the Republic of Ireland head coach. David Walsh, in his comment piece, his column this morning, says being criticised by his own players didn't help this week, but it's his stubborn old-school approach that cost Martin O'Neill his job ultimately. Is that analysis correct?
Well, look, David Walsh is a incredibly knowledgeable and well connected in Irish football, so I'm not going to quibble. I think my own opinion is it's slightly harsh, and I think that if you look at the resources, the playing resources that Martin O'Neill has got at his disposal, I actually think he's done a pretty good job. I think, this is not the Ireland of old where there was a lot of talent at their disposal. It's slim pickings now, and I think actually within what O'Neill has done, there have been some real highlights. Actually, I mean, the beating Italy at the Euros. I think in a lot of ways they punched above their weight, and I think it's a slightly harsh assessment of O'Neill. I'm a fan of his, and I just think that whoever takes that over, it looks like it's going to be Mick McCarthy, then I think that they're going to face similar problems. I don't see things improving massively there. I think you're looking at a bit of a period in the wilderness for the Irish.
That's the romantic appointment, isn't it? Get McCarthy back.
Yeah.
It's like we're in the 90s. Spice Girls are back and Mick McCarthy's back at Ireland.
It's a shame Roy Keane isn't staying on as Mick's assistant.
He's bringing the other Keane in, isn't he? Robbie
I mean,
Keane.
to be fair to Mick McCarthy, the job he did at Ipswich is looking an awful lot better.
I'm a massive fan of Mick McCarthy.
Yeah, me too.
I think he does really well at every job he's in.
But McCarthy, when he was in charge of the Republic before, he had a far better pool of talent.
Yeah.
So he's got a big job on now.
Will we see Martin back?
I think so.
Will he manage again?
I hope so. Yeah, I think he will. I mean, I think that he always wanted to come back to club football whenever I think that probably would have been his plan, to come back to club football whenever his spell in charge of Ireland ended. And I think there will be clubs in the Premier League who'd be willing to look at him. Look, I mean, it's a prime time for, as we all know, for clubs to start looking around. Vacancies will arise. I'd be very surprised if Martin wasn't in the shake-up for some of those.
Yeah, and of course, history tells us he did a great job at Celtic, a very good job at Aston Villa with those top six finishes all those years ago as well. OK, sport and politics is a difficult mix. It's always difficult to talk about them. But Qatar World Cup, The Guardian have been writing extensively about it this week. Matt, has it changed your thoughts on a World Cup going there 4 years to go, which is the hook that, or the peg that The Guardian hang their pieces on this week? Are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say it's changed my thoughts, because I've always been uncomfortable with it, and all you read about it is more stuff that makes you even more uncomfortable, really.
Hard to convince you,
Yeah, I mean, the allegations of the human rights over there and the way the workers are treated over there is really not nice reading. And in an ideal world, countries with those kind of allegations around them wouldn't be hosting it until you were sure that everything was operating as it should be. But unfortunately, things like that within football often get swept under the carpet. I do think once you get there, probably in 4 years, and once you're at the tournament, it'll probably be a good tournament.
Well, we actually had this sort of different feelings because of the different issues, but we were all, well, I know I was, a bit sort of reticent about going to Russia for the World Cup this summer. We've all been to Russia before, we know it's had its problems and everything, but that was a fantastic tournament this summer.
They showed their best face, didn't they? One
of the best World Cups I've been to, and you just have to live in hope that Qatar will deliver. I mean, they've got a high bar to reach now, but you hope that they put on a similar sort of showpiece event.
It's a problem for sports journalists and how much we reference or how much time we expend on highlighting the deficiencies of regimes in the places where we go to watch football, where we go to report on football. And clearly that's come into the public domain again this week with the Matthew Hedges jailing.
I was going to call it a trial, but it doesn't feel like a trial.
No, it was a show trial, wasn't it? A 5-minute trial. And whether Manchester City are therefore culpable or need to respond to that. And obviously Qatar should never have been awarded the World Cup in the first place. That was, I think, it was fairly obvious now that was a corrupt decision, one way or the other, and clearly the revelations about human rights abuses there make uncomfortable reading. Nobody's going to pretend that Russia has a perfect political system and there aren't concerns about human rights there either. But as Jeremy said, as a tournament to cover, as a football tournament, it was a great tournament. So I think I don't really know what the answer is, apart from the fact that I suppose our newspapers, in all of our cases, cover the human rights abuses and the political issues going on in those countries in other parts of the newspaper. I think it's certainly our job to reference them too and acknowledge them, but do we? It's difficult. Do we stop going to a World Cup because we don't agree with what Vladimir Putin's doing? Do we stop going to watch Manchester City because we're worried about the legal system in Abu Dhabi?
I mean, we wouldn't step out of our houses, would we? If we applied those principles to everyday life, we actually wouldn't get out of the house, would we? OK, strong stuff from the boys there on Qatar World Cup and events in United Arab Emirates as well. OK, next up we're going to talk about Claudio Ranieri, new Fulham manager, got off to a winning start. More on that next. OK, Goals on Sunday follows us as ever straight after the Sunday supplement this morning. I gather Ben's got some breaking news. Ben.
Morning, Neil. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Well, we've had a last-minute substitution, haven't we, Cam?
We have indeed. Mick McCarthy phoned me Friday afternoon to say he'd got the job at Ireland and he couldn't do our show. So we got Charlie Adam.
Have you just announced that Mick McCarthy is the new Republic of Ireland?
I have indeed.
There you go. Breaking news right here on Goals on Sunday. We'll be live at 11 o'clock with more stunning news.
Breaking news. Should work for a newspaper. In the future for Ben and Cammy there. OK, let's move on to Fulham. Good win for them yesterday. Big win, important win. Ranieri's first game in charge. What changes will he bring in? What kind of effect? Well, how will he galvanise them? Because he clearly did with that first win yesterday.
He'll lift the place. He's very good at doing that, and you can tell already he's done that. He'll lift the mood. What we didn't see really yesterday, which I do think he's very good at, is he actually... One of his biggest strengths is sorting out defences. I mean, you can look at his character and kind of think he's this wacky guy and really actually forget about some of his work, but his strength has always been in organising defences.
Yeah. So they only conceded 2 yesterday.
And the defence wasn't very organised yesterday, but I think in time that'll be what he has to do and what he will do.
He's Italian.
He's Italian, exactly. But they needed that bounce. I mean, I think that was a really important result for them because I think that was a fixture they had to win. He needed that bounce. They needed a bit of confidence. Mitrovic needed a goal. He got 2. So it ended up a really, really good day for him.
They're the games that they should be targeting. I mean, look, they're playing the likes of Liverpool, City and Chelsea. You're not going to get anything from those games.
But that's what they win those games. Chelsea they play next weekend, yeah.
Yeah. If they win those games, they've got half a chance.
Ranieri?
Yeah, I think like Matt says, I think he'll definitely make them more solid. I think they were terrific to watch last season, Fulham, in the Championship. They had that long unbeaten run. They were playing some terrific football. But I think there was a feeling that there was a little bit of naivety about them when they made the step up and that they couldn't quite play that style of football in the Premier League without getting punished. And they were getting punished. And I think Ranieri will bring a more measured approach, probably, as he did at Leicester. He'll tighten things up and he'll make them more solid. He's already praising Mitrovic to the skies, quite understandably. He'll get the best out of him. So I think it's a good appointment. It's a good time to do it. And I think, put it this way, I think if the other club's down at the bottom of the table, your heart will sink slightly that Ranieri got that job because Fulham will improve.
When Ranieri's name is mentioned to you, Ollie, what's your sort of spontaneous reflex react? Because I always think back to Chelsea. I know Leicester City's, and quite rightly so. He's the guy who won the title, and understandably so. And he deserves complete respect for that, unquestionably and undoubtedly.
Yeah.
But I always think Chelsea.
Yeah. Well, I know what you mean, but I don't anymore. I just think Leicester, and I think
which is probably good for him.
Probably, one of the greatest stories there's ever been in English football, probably in world football, and of course, I also think about. I'm aware of the failures he's had, and he has had plenty of. He's had plenty of failures at club and international level, but I still think of him. I'll always think of him as the man who pulled off that miracle. Something that I think none of us thought could ever be done. And it's a question of how much that moves into whether he is now equipped to do a job to save Fulham and to keep Fulham up. And I think, look, the fact that he did what he did can only give him at Leicester, I mean, can only bring him respect in the dressing room. I think it's a game changer for his reputation.
It's amazing, really, that he left the Premier League as Premier League champion, and when he comes back with a bottom club. I mean, Mourinho left Chelsea a Premier League champion and was having a nightmare and gets the Man United job. I'm not sure Ranieri should get that level of job, but it's incredible, I think, how underrated he is almost. I take your point, Ollie, he's had failures, but he's actually got a very good body of work as well. He actually did a really good job at Chelsea. Really good job at Chelsea. I mean, he was quite unfortunate to lose his job there. They made a Champions League semi-final, second or third. It's funny because I am guilty of it. I underrate him. I just look at his character and you almost brush off what good jobs he's done. But in actual fact, it's incredible. I don't think you'd ever get another situation where a guy would leave as a champion and his only way back is to take the bottom club.
It's a brave call from Ranieri. I mean, I'm not saying for 1 minute that, say, if he didn't keep them up, it would sort of destroy his achievement at Leicester, because nothing could do that, but it would certainly tarnish the last memory we had of him in English football.
Yeah.
It's convenient for him, though. He lives nearby. He's been going every week. He's said it's a very convenient job for his lifestyle.
But what he did, so this is what the sentiment that I did admire was he said, "Look, I love football. This has been my life.
Yeah.
I want to work.
Yeah.
So this is the job that became
He's going to
available."
have to work this one, because this is a big task. But I mean, you would like to think, as if you're a Fulham fan, that he had discussions with the owners, and there's a transfer window coming up in a few weeks' time. He's probably going to give him some money to spend, and he probably needs to bring in a couple of defenders.
Well, he spent 100 million in August, didn't they? Look where that gone.
Yeah.
When I say Mark Hughes to you, what's your spontaneous reaction to that?
Failure.
Then?
I think he's a failure as a manager. I think he keeps getting these jobs, and I mean, last season he nearly took 2 teams down in the same season, didn't he, with Stoke and the current job. But I don't know. I've got nothing personal against him. I just think you see him sometimes, he gets involved in spats with other managers that are totally unnecessary. I just think he's overrated. I mean, he's doing a mediocre job at Southampton now. If I was a Southampton supporter, I'd be really, really worried about the next 6 months. I mean, they've won one game, I think one league game, not one at home. Looks bleak.
Well, people felt very differently about Mark Hughes when he was the Wales manager. Then, of course, Blackburn Rovers, hugely successful there. What changes, Ollie? Is it the manager or the club?
Well, I think Jeremy's being a bit harsh. I understand. I mean, I know that Hughes has got plenty of detractors, and much of his recent record, you're right, hasn't been great. But I think he has done some. I think he did well at City. You know, in just at the time when they were about to explode into the big time, and I think he did very well at Stoke. I mean, he tried to change the way. Well, he did change the way Stoke played, and initially he had some very good results, and then things tailed off. So I mean, I think his record is not dissimilar to a lot of managers who manage basically at the wrong end of our table. It's been hit and miss. He's had some successes and some problems. I mean, you could say, if you look on the upside, he got Southampton out of trouble yesterday. Last season he saved Southampton. He kept them up. This season it's been a struggle, and I think clearly he's under a lot of pressure. Southampton have got a bad run of fixtures coming up, I think, and he desperately needs to get something out of them. They'll play United, I think, next week. So, there's going to be a lot riding on that for both managers.
3 ninth-place finishes in succession with Stoke. Southampton would do absolutely anything to come close to that, wouldn't they?
Yeah,
as things stand.
I don't think he's a failure. I think you are being a little bit harsh. I think he's having a tough time now. But I don't really know where Southampton are going anymore. I think they've lost their identity. They had such a strong identity for a long time. They were held up as this model club, bringing through youngsters. I mean, that was always going to be hard to maintain. But their recruitment was good as well. And then their recruitment just went through the floor. Now they've got no kind of technical director. So who makes the decision on the manager now? We don't even know. I mean, around this time, you wouldn't particularly know who would be responsible for saying, right, Hughes out, Hughes in, or who we're going to go for. They don't look like they know what they're doing at Southampton or what they want to be.
Apart from selling all their best players.
Apart from selling all their best players, and it's caught up with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose if they were thinking of sacking Hughes, who would they turn to? There's not a great sort of abundance of options out there.
Well, Moyes, Sam Allardyce,
O'Neill.
the specialists. Yeah, you never know. OK, next up we're going to talk Bournemouth. They're playing Arsenal today, and also I'm going to ambush Matt. It's Villa against Birmingham. More on that game is coming next. When I look at the Championship table, I see some massive clubs languishing a division below the Premier League, all of them fighting to get into the Premier League, of course. Norwich at the top at the moment, Middlesbrough winning yesterday
Leeds
on the
are up
turn. Leeds United, Leeds
Big
United,
club.
West Brom, Sheffield United, Frank Lampard's Derby, Aston Villa, the likes of Birmingham as well. Huge, powerful, influential figures in English football in the past. Matt, it is Aston Villa against Birmingham today. What does this latest derby say for the two teams? Where are they at?
They're depressingly close at the moment in the table. To be as a Villa fan, it's a bit too tight. As someone who now lives down in London, what I would say is I don't think people outside Birmingham fully get how big the Villa-Birmingham derby is. It's massive and it's nasty. It's horrible to go to.
The game I always think of, Matt, is Enkelman.
Enkelman, yeah, thanks for that. I tend to not think of that one so much. I remember my dad taking to me one at St Andrews when I was 7 years old, and the police having to bring the dogs in, and people all sitting on the roof of the stadium to get away from the trouble. I mean, it's nasty and horrible.
Which is the bigger game, Matt, for you? The Copa Libertadores final between Boca Juniors and River Plate, or Aston Villa against Birmingham?
There's just no contest, is there? It's Aston Villa versus Birmingham, clearly.
Oh, you're going to have to slow me afternoon off Twitter.
No, it's a huge game, huge game for both clubs. To be fair, Gary Monk's done a really good job at Birmingham this season. I mean, they look like they'd be in a relegation battle, and he's got them doing well. Yeah. So I'm a little bit worried about it.
Yeah, but good win before the international break against
very good win.
Frank Lampard's Derby, wasn't it? A big win, big result, that one.
Yeah, very big win, very good performance too.
New manager, big influence. What the changes that he's made, of course, from Brentford.
Yeah, he's brought in a new playing style. The Villa fans got a little bit sick of the playing style under Steve Bruce. He's trying to be a bit more expansive. He's trying to get more out of Jack Grealish, who, given his value, has got to score more and got to assist more. And I think he's putting a big premium on doing that. And the early signs have been encouraging, actually.
Yeah, OK. And you can, of course, watch Aston Villa against Birmingham. That's from noon on Sky this afternoon. Let's talk Bournemouth. They play Arsenal today. A lot's been written about Eddie Howe and his ambitions to crack or to break into the top six, the established order, to break the established order. We are going into this. They have lost the last two games against Manchester United and Newcastle, but the sentiment is there, the ambition is there. Can they really do it?
Realistically, no. Simply because I think the top teams have so much wealth and they've such a good ability to buy all the best players. I get the feeling that Bournemouth might have basically reached a ceiling point. I mean, it is a remarkable story. I mean, the Eddie Howe thing, where he started and where he's took them to. And it would be refreshing to see a club of that stature break into that sort of top table. And they've done it in such a great way in terms of the way they play the football, a great side to watch. And that game today with Arsenal should be a fantastic game. I just fear that they have, like Burnley last season in a lot of respects, they have reached a point where it's as good as it's going to get for them, and will they maybe tail away? They have not got the biggest squad in the Premier League. If they have some injuries, that might affect things. But I'm not trying to be negative. It is a remarkable achievement where they have come from and where they are now.
We admire their naked ambition, though, don't we? Eddie Howe, this seen as this young, progressive manager, Ollie. He's got a very, very distinctive style of play. He knows what he wants from his players, and he's always demanding more. And he always wants to develop as a coach. That's something to admire, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I mean, it can only really be good things to say about Eddie Howe. I mean, like Jeremy says, it's not just what they've done; it's the way they've done it. And when you go down to Bournemouth, you look at the infrastructure at what used to be Dean Court, the Vitality Stadium. It's not the biggest stadium. It's not the biggest infrastructure for a team. For Eddie Howe to do what he's done, obviously with some decent financial backing, but for him to do what he's done at that club is an astonishing achievement, and I think deserves only the highest praise. And for them to be playing, they're not playing percentage football. They're playing brave football, and they're carrying it off with aplomb, and they're fantastic to watch. I think it's a great story what he's done there.
Yeah, they're not afraid of anybody, as we saw when they played Manchester United a couple of weeks ago. I know they lost that game at home, but they're not afraid, are they? Not intimidated. They won't be intimidated by Arsenal. Can you sum up the job that Unai Emery has done so far since he's succeeded Wenger?
I think he's done a really good job at the moment. I think they've still got issues at the back, but I think they're good to watch. I think he's made some brave calls. He left out Ozil earlier in the season when Ozil didn't want to play in a certain position, and he's made it clear he'll only play him in a certain position now. There's not spectacular progress in terms of where they're going to finish, because I still think they're going to finish fifth or sixth, but I think he's stabilised it. He's got the fans on side. I think it's good that he looks like he's kind of no nonsense with them. He's got them running more, he's got them working harder, and I think given time they will improve. The problem for Arsenal is they're coming from such a distance back now, and I'm not convinced they'll ever have the resources to spend of City, Liverpool and even Chelsea. That how they make up that ground, I'm not actually sure. But I do think Emery's doing a good job.
They have to spend, don't they? I mean,
but I don't think Kroenke will.
No, I don't think he will either. But and I think that that in a way that was the problem that Wenger faced too, wasn't it? I mean, I did my column about it today. There's absolutely no criticism of Emery because it's way too early to talk about it. Arsenal were fourth this time last year. A team that was, when they were being managed by a guy who was supposed to be washed up, past it, etc. At the moment, they're fifth.
Yeah.
It's sometimes an issue of perception. It's about the spending as much as anything.
We'll see how they get on this afternoon. Time's beaten us, I'm afraid. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for your company. Thanks to Ollie, to Jeremy and to Matt. OK, lots of football coming your way. First up then, is that big game from the Midlands. It's Aston Villa against Birmingham. It's followed by Bournemouth against Arsenal. That's from 12:30. Wolves against Huddersfield is from 3:30. Tomorrow it's Monday Night Football. Burnley against Newcastle. Download the Sky Sports app. You can watch the in-game goals and the highlights on your mobile phone. Ben and Cammy are next. Up next with Goals on Sunday. Charlie Adam will be with them, late substitute. He's in on Goals on Sunday. That's next up. OK, don't forget you can download the podcast from all the usual places. You can catch up with the show. It's on demand. We'll see you next week, the same time, or the same place rather. Slightly earlier time, 8 o'clock. We'll see you then, 8 o'clock next weekend on Sunday Supplement.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.